Welcome to Brain Strength. This is the series where this average fool does a couple athletic things every now and then while teaching you a thing or two about sports psychology along the way. And I'm your host, RJ Lynch, mental performance consultant. And with my master's in sports psychology, let's get things rolling. In today's episode of Brain Strength, we're going to be focusing on the idea of emotional/arousal regulation. And when I say arousal regulation, I don't mean that type of regulation, so get your mind out of the gutter.
Giggity.
No, instead, what I mean emotional or arousal regulation, I'm talking about how excited we get or how unexcited we are during a competition. Are we up here where we're just amped out of our mind? We've got that 80s rock rolling, music's blaring, we're like, ah! Or are we all the way down in the other realm of things where we're just kind of like, and we're just sitting there, there's no emotions, there's no nothing, or maybe we're a little lethargic. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Figure out how we shift from one to the other and finding the thing that's right for us. So a better definition probably for it is emotional arousal regulation is the idea of being able to control emotional and physiological responses to allow ourselves to have our best performance. So are these responses that we're trying to regulate? Well, they might be anxiety, anger, fear, excitement, a lot of pride. It could be happiness. It could be any of those natural emotional responses we have. Our physiological responses might be how fast our heart is beating. Is it going a million miles an hour and we're just kind of like, oh yeah? Or is it like, bum bum, bum bum, bum bum, bum? Other responses is how tense our muscles get. Are we very high strung and we're kind of like cramped up to here because we're just so tight with everything? Are we sweating a lot? How are we responding when things are happening? So what does it look like to have proper control over those emotions or your arousal level? Well, someone that has control is calm and focused. Even when they're excited, even when they are amped, they're in control of that amp. They're in control of how out there they are. It's the football player who's able to just drive into somebody, get super excited because they just laid out a hit, but then get back into the next play or recognize like, oh, I'm so excited I just knocked that guy flat on his butt, but the ball also popped out, so now I have to go recover it. They're able to still be calm and focused despite this high level of excitement they have. They're going to be consistent. So if you're able to control your emotions, you're able to be consistent with things. You're not letting them affect your day-to-day actions. You're not letting them affect outcomes because you're not able to control. Next up, you're very aware of your triggers and how to recover from them. So there's certain things that happen during games, during competitions, during practices. Maybe it's the way your coach speaks to you. Maybe it's something that happens with a teammate, an interaction, or how a referee blows a call. All these things can drive these responses of anger, of excitement, of whatever it is. Are we able to recognize like, oh, when the referee makes a call, I get angry? Well, you're able to be aware of it. Now, how do you respond to it? How do you recover from the fact you're angry to get back into the next play? Next up, someone that's under control is able to find that optimal level of emotion and arousal. Like I was making the point earlier how you have some that get super amped, some that are super lethargic with things. Well, for some people, and depending on the sport, they need to be all the way up here. Some need to be all the way down here. Some need to be somewhere in the middle. And someone that's in control of their emotions now is able to find that sweet spot where they're excited enough that they want to compete, that they want to go after it, but calm and relaxed enough where they're not getting frustrated when things don't go their way. Vice versa, if you are controlled by your emotions, the things you'll see is you'll be emotionally unstable. So you go up and down. You are controlled by these waves instead of just rolling along with them. You're inconsistent with your play, in your reactions, how you handle things. You get lost in your emotions. So instead of just being angry, you almost become angry. Like you're just this beast that's driven by your emotion instead of the emotion that you have. You're unable to really find that sweet spot in that arousal excitement spectrum. So maybe sometimes you're overexcited, you're over the top, and you're blowing by plays because you get lost in things, or you're so lethargic that you're kind of just dragging your body like, I don't want to be here. And then finally, you have difficulty recovering. When you get lost in the waves, when you get lost in the storm of emotions, you don't know how to get out of it. If any of these controlled ideas sound like you or any of your athletes, stick around and see what we can do about it. Now, before I get into that, I want to start with what I like to call the science bits. There's two theories or ideas around arousal that I'm going to stick to here that kind of guide why we do this. And one is called the invert U hypothesis. And it's this idea that performance and arousal or emotional regulation are kind of on this graph with one another. Someone who's very lethargic, who doesn't have a whole lot going, is kind of just dragging their feet here. They're kind of here. Their performance sucks, their emotions, all that suck. Everything just kind of sucks. Then they're getting a little bit more aroused. They have a little bit more emotion. Their performance improves a bit, but it's not quite the peak yet. Then a little bit more. Then they hit this peak where they're at the exact amount of excitement to lethargy that they need, that their performance is best. Then if they get any more excited, now we start dropping our performance. We start getting a little rash, a little reckless with things. And then it just kind of goes to that point where you're overexcited way too much, your performance sucks, you're kind of just a ping pong bouncing off the walls, energy going every which way, and there's no control. With that, there is another one very similar called IZOF, which is individual zone of optimal function, where everybody has these different zones, and depending on your sport, depending on who you are as a person, you're going to find the zone that's perfect for you of how much arousal, how emotional you need to be to have your best performance. The other one that is the idea of catastrophe theory. And it's this idea that if anxiety and arousal become too high, catastrophe happens. So this one's a little bit more structured on the idea that eventually we're going to hit this peak where we become too anxious, too excited, too whatever it is, where emotions are too high strung that we're just going to fall apart and something bad's going to happen, whether it's injury or poor performance. We just hit this cliff and everything comes to an end. So what do I do as a mental performance consultant when I'm working with an athlete or working with a team to find that perfect zone? Well, the first thing, because my background's a lot of mindfulness, is breathing exercises. If you want a quick sample of how you can adjust your emotional and arousal level just with your breath, take a few moments to take some deep breaths in and out long. And just notice how those deep breaths in and out, they calm yourself down, they bring your levels down, you become calm. Whereas if you take breaths in and quick ones out like that, that brings a little bit more excitement, that raises the heartbeat a bit. If you watch weightlifters at times, they'll do, I believe it's, I'm going to butcher this, Vajrasana or something along those lines, where they take that deep breath, tighten everything, and then breathe again to strengthen, and then their eyes get a little bit bigger, their face gets a little tense, they're braced, and now they go, they hit their big weight, they rack it, let all the energy out, and now they're just like, ah! That's going to be just how you can use breath to affect how you act. So depending on my athletes, I'll bring them through different breathing exercises, usually first to bring arousal down, because most people have more issue being overexcited, over anxious, than they do being too lethargic. But occasionally we have to get there if that's the case. The next thing I have athletes do is performance tracking. So I have them create little logs, little worksheets, where it's like, talk about your practice today. How were you feeling during it? Were you anxious? Were you calm? Were you this, that? And how did the practice go? Did it go really well? Okay. Did it go poorly? Okay. And then we start tracking over weeks, months, being like, oh, when you have your best practices, you're calm with a little bit of excitement going on here. Let's try to focus on doing more of that during games. Along with that, I will usually do what's called thought reframing. So in there, I might have them also track some of the thoughts, some of the things that go through their head during a performance. And if it's things that are harming them or bringing them down, making them feel more or too excited, I might have them come up with other things that they can say in place of it and then give them ways to cue it, like, oh, I gotta do this or that. Tie my shoe to quick calm myself down, whatever it is. Next up, we might simulate pressure at times. So maybe we meet at a basketball court. If they're a basketball player, I just put on loud music, start yelling at them as they're a free throw line, and try to get them a little bit more amped and see if they can bring themselves down. Then lastly, something I might do is routine development. Routines can, as long as we are not binded to them and think that our routine is what makes or breaks our performance, routines can work very well in kind of saying ourselves, putting ourselves in the mindset where we know, like, I can perform well, I've taken my breath, I've calmed myself down, I'm ready to go. So just finding a routine that helps them sail into, to arrive at their performance is where I like to go with routines. Coaches and athletes, what are some things that you can do, especially for coaches? First thing is control the stress level of practices. Do things where maybe you have extremely loud music, crowd noise going on, things that are supposed to get your athletes extremely overexcited, extremely anxious, and then work with them through breathing things that maybe you do or that you have a mental performance do of, can you now calm yourself down? Can you bring things down? Create those simulated pressures where all of a sudden there's a disadvantage or there's time on the clock where you have to score X amount of points. Can we bring ourselves down, breathe in these moments so that we're ready for when the big time comes? Very similarly, look at the idea of intention management. Can you go from lows to highs to lows in practice? So an example might be if you have athletes do their sprints to start things out, so their heart rate gets up, they're very up there. It's something that's very taxing. It needs to be very emotional because they're got to put power forth. Now can you bring them in and now they have to work technique. So you go from sprints back and forth to a technique thing where now we're just dribbling, working through our handles. Something that in theory, because they're so excited, so over the top from the sprints, they're like, oh, I gotta go, is going to mess with how they're able to control ball in dribbling. So they have to sail back in, they have to learn to control. A perfect example of how this might look in a game of why it's practical. Imagine you're in a game and team goes down, block shot, starts a fast break, charge in, things go down, ball goes up, miss, quick rebound, start, and they're trying to get down a fast break down to the other side. So now we're kind of in this mentality of like, go, go, go. But as you get down, you see all the other team come back, they set up their defense, and if you just charge in like you're still in that fast break mentality, you go in, you turn the ball over, and it kind of happens again. Whereas maybe you have to go from fast break to, now we gotta sail back into our half-court offense. Be like, all right, calm down, take a breath, relax, think through the play logically. The next thing would be group routines. So just like how an individual routine can help an athlete sell in, if the group has a routine of, all right, We're going to sit. Everybody's going to breathe for a minute. Now we're going to do our warm-up. We're going to do this exercise. Then you're going to have this time for your own thing. If you're a private school or so, maybe you have that quick prayer beforehand that's part of the routine to settle people in. Those are all kind of things that you can slowly develop as a coach or as a team to get you ready to control your emotions. So that's all I really have for today. Not a lot of athletic things for me to do to demonstrate this one, but I hope you have a better idea and you can take some things away. If you have questions, as always, reach out to my website, set up a session. We can talk about this, help you be the best you. So until next time, if there's anything I said that offends you in any way, I hope you can forgive me. If you say anything in the comment section that offends me, I'll probably forgive you for it. So until next time, brain strength out.